Good morning, everyone. We'll call our meeting to order. We are having hearings on the agency budget for post-secondary education system. We'll start out with Shirley Morrow with KLRD. She'll present the PES and BA.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Committee. You should have in front of you the post-secondary education system-wide budget analysis. This contains the information from all of the universities and the Board of Regents. To try and save a little time so that you've got additional time to talk to the universities, I'm going to go over this very quickly, but please, if you have any questions whatsoever, or if there's something I don't touch on that you have a question about, please feel free either today or Thursday to ask me the questions. The first thing I'm going to talk about on the front page is the reappropriations from 21 to 22. There are always reappropriations for the Board of Regents, which are the scholarships. The Board of Regents will send out all of the scholarship money, but due to certain circumstances with students, some of the money will not get expended and it will come back and reappropriate to the next year. So of the $3.2 million that's reappropriated, about $2.7 million is through the Board of Regents scholarships. The remainder of that, which is about $500,000, is KU Medical Center. KU Medical Center has $1 million in the psychiatry scholarships and the psychiatry residential program, rural health bridging, and they expend about half of the $970,000 for scholarships. They expend about half of that, so $500,000 is reappropriated. And then for the rural health bridging, which are the residents, there's $30,000 in that program. For the last 2 years, that entire amount has reappropriated, and they actually are lapsing that amount because they do not have the 3 residents to use that money in the psychiatry program. What I'm going to start with is on page 4 with the fiscal 22 budget analysis. Again, this is kind of a new format of how we're looking at the universities. So since this is fiscal year 22, they have an approved amount from last year. Again, you'll see the $3.2 million appropriation, and then there are some agency adjustments to that. There were some corrections and adjustments to the benefit rates of $1.2 million. You'll see the KU Medical Center lapse of the residence programs there of about $30,000. There's FTE adjustments of $142, additional federal funds of $176 million. The Educational Building Fund carry forward of $39 million, some restricted fee fund additional expenditures of $48 million, and then some other adjustments of about $9 million, and that includes some research money, housing money, and parking funds. And the governor does concur with the agency's 22 budgets.
Please continue.
Okay. On page 7, we have the analysis of 2023. You have that first line, which is the revised estimate for 2022 as a starting point. The agency is requesting $161 million in enhancements. Different from the 22 budget, we removed the $43 million that was the maintenance of effort funding. There's 58 adjustments in the FTE, additional $8 million in expenditures of the general fee fund, which is tuition, a reduction of $4.8 million in expenditures from the restricted fee fund, The largest adjustment there are the lack of the federal funds, $145 million, and then some other adjustments. There is an increase of a little over $1 million for benefits, but the majority is a decrease of about $20 million in other adjustments. And those are explained on the next page, on page 8. And then the governor's recommendation is only concerning the enhancements. It's a decrease of $18.6 million, and this is because the governor did not agree with all of the enhancements, so I'll go through those individually. And they're on the next page, on page 9.
Are there any questions so far for Shirley? Seeing none, please proceed.
Okay. So on page 9, you see the gray box with the 13 different enhancements. The first one is to restore state funding at the universities of $45.7 million. The governor did agree with that. There's student financial aid for $25 million. The governor agreed with that. There's an enhanced student support of $5 million. The governor did not agree with that amount or that funding. Number 4 is $25 million for the Capital Renewal Initiative. The governor did agree with that. Number 5 is grants for economic development. The governor put that into the Board of Commerce, so that is not in this budget. But she did agree to the $10 million. Number 6 is information technology infrastructure, $20 million. The governor agreed with that. Number 7 is Washburn University. They had submitted for an enhancement 2 new programs that came up to $2.1 million. The governor did not agree to the 2 programs, but did increase their base pay by $1.5 million for a total of $14 million in their line item in the Board of Regents budget. Number 8, Excel in Career Technical Education, $2.5 million. The governor did agree with that. Funding for the 2-year college cost model. This is to help fund the gap for the tiered and non-tiered. The request is for $6 million, and the governor agreed with that. The governor's budget has $2 million in the tiered funding and $4 million in the non-tiered funding. I will point out that the current funding for tiered and non-tiered, the tiered line is technically fully funded. However, due to the distribution between the community and technical colleges, or I'm sorry, the community and technical colleges, some are overfunded and some are underfunded. So the amount of full funding would fund all of the colleges if the money was redistributed. But if you left all of the colleges whole and didn't reduce any of the funding that they're overfunded, you would still need to add money. There are 7 colleges that still have a gap in funding. The rest of them, per the formula, have full funding or are overfunded. Number 10, the Technical Education Capital Outlay. The Board of Regents asked for $4 million, and the governor granted $1 million in her budget for that. One-time projects at colleges, $15 million. The governor approved that. The National Guard scholarships, $1 million. The governor agreed with that. And the last line item, the Regents' office administration, is $305,000. And the governor agreed with that. And that funding is to help administer the Promise Scholarship Act and the Capital Renewal Initiative. So of the $161 million that the agency requested, the governor added $143 million. In addition to that, but not in the Board of Regents budget, the governor added, again, as I mentioned earlier, the $10 million for Eco-Devo projects in the Board of Commerce, or the Agency of Commerce, an additional $195 million in grants, again, in the Department of Commerce, and then an additional $24 million as a part of the 5% COLA.
Are there any questions for Shirley? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this may be for the Board of Regents, but you mentioned over here, I think it was on number 9, tiered and non-tiered being funded, that there were still 7 colleges with a gap in funding.
Correct.
If we fix that, do we know what that amount might be?
I could add it up for you.
Or additional? I mean, you're saying technically it's funded, but because of the way the allocation is, keeping people whole, we would need to add more money to that to fix that.
It looks like a little over $5 million. And again, that's very, very rough, just quickly.
I was hoping you were going to say $5,000. So thank you. And I had one other question.
Yes.
And that was just for the tiered. The non-tiered has quite a gap left in it.
Okay.
Most of the colleges.
Thank you. My other question, and again, this may be for the Regents, do we know how and when the $195 million grants are going to play out, and how that money might come back to the Regents institutions?
The only one I can say for sure, because it's written in the bill, is $20 million for Wichita State for an aviation project. The rest of it, I have been given no information.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Shirley? Seeing none, thank you, Shirley.
Okay, and then there's a lot of other information in here. Each of the scholarships are listed. There is a page for each of the universities with their individual 2023 budgets. And then the last page is capital improvements. The majority of that is rehabilitation and repair. There are a few projects in 2022, the Forsyth Library, Acres Energy Center and Rarick Hall at Fort Hays, a tennis facility at Emporia State, the Marcus Welcome Center at Wichita State, and again, the remainder are rehab and repair or deferred maintenance for 22. In 23, there's the Convergent Science 2 facility and the Marcus Welcome Center at Wichita State, the Overman Student Center at Pittsburgh, and the Forsyth Library renovation at Fort Hays State, with the remainder being rehab and repair and deferred maintenance. And the governor did concur with both of those. And again, a reminder, there's $25 million as an enhancement for 23 for the capital initiative.
Any other questions for Shirley? Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Blake Flanders, President of the Board of Regents. Welcome, committee, Blake.
Thank you, Chair Billinger and members of the committee. I've put together some slides here, and I'll just walk through those if you'd like here to explain our budget and some of the board's priorities. I thought it might be helpful if you look at slide 2, just to get a little bit of a backdrop on why the board is making certain requests and what we see in terms of what the higher education system can do for Kansas. We have a strategic plan that has 3 pillars. Our strategic plan is called Building a Future. Those 3 pillars are how do we help Kansas families and how do we help Kansas businesses, and also how do we bring economic prosperity to grow our state and local economies. We have metrics for each of these pillars and areas that we're certainly looking at in terms of improvement. And we also are searching and continue to look for and identify promising practices that we can implement across the system where it makes sense. We really need to focus. Our population is changing in Kansas, and as we look to continue to recruit and prepare the talent for the next generation, our institutional leaders know that our system has to change as well. If you look at the next slide, in terms of being a talent pipeline for business, you know, the Kansas Chamber's done surveys as well that business is always in the need of great talent to make them more competitive. We have several initiatives where we've had success in terms of bringing that talent to businesses, but it obviously is never enough. Now, we don't want to, I don't mind a little bit of a workforce shortage. I've seen it in 2008 where there was no workforce shortage, and that typically means no one's hiring and the economy is not doing very well at all. But we do not want acute shortages, and we know we have those in some areas. Some areas where we've had success partnering with the state legislature and really assisting, I think, many Kansas regional economies. One would be the engineering initiative. We had the goal, I believe it was 2012, we had the goal of, we were graduating 875 engineers across the 3 universities, Kansas State, University of Kansas, and Wichita State University. That was a mistake. I told Wichita I wouldn't keep putting them last, but when you start with a W, you end up. So we were graduating 875, and here's why I think this was a great initiative, because the legislature said, we're going to give you $100 million essentially over 10 years, but you're also going to put in $100 million out of non-state sources to match that money. So the universities matched the dollars. Now we're at 1,500 graduates. The goal was 1,365. So what is our opportunity there? Our new opportunity, and you re-upped that initiative last year, our new opportunity is to retain more in Kansas. So that's what we're working on with the Department of Commerce right now. How do we connect more of those engineers while they're going to school? How do we connect them with a Kansas business in some kind of internship? Because what we know is if you wait until January of their senior year to begin the hiring process, they're already gone. And for many of our smaller businesses that may not be name brand, we need to plug them in earlier into that equation. We also had a nursing initiative that we launched in 2006 in partnership with the legislature. You asked for 250 more slots in our nursing programs, and those were RN programs, and it's unique. That credential is actually the same for the baccalaureate level as it is for the associate degree level. You become an RN. We actually are producing that many more graduates a year, not just slots. You know, it's much easier to create it is easier to create slots in a program than to create graduates, because you do have some people that don't finish the program. But the system, I thought, really responded well there. As well, we've had a partnership with what we call Senate Bill 155, or Excel in Career Tech. There is a chronic shortage for all levels of trades, and you know that if you've had to have anything repaired. And there seems to be a shortage as well to some of those essential workers at the certified nurse aide level in our long-term care facilities. And we've grown that. We used to recruit about 3,500 to 3,800 per year of high school students, juniors and seniors in high school, into our post-secondary system. So they would take a college course in one of these technical areas, about 3,500 to 3,800 a year. Since this program, we were over 13,000. Now, we've come back a little bit because of the pandemic, but I expect those numbers to rebound. And I think that program's been a huge success. We also have a tremendous amount of industry-sponsored research. I know that likely the chancellor and presidents will tell you about that later. That industry-sponsored research and those federal dollars coming in to the university purchase tremendous amount of goods and services from Kansas businesses and also employ a number of people in jobs. We also are a talent recruiter. There's very few entities in the state that recruit talent, and we're one of those. We lose some high school graduates to out-of-state institutions, but we recruit twice as many in as go out. So we're a net importer of talent. Now, our challenge is going to be, once we get those students here, how do we keep them here? And so that's really an area of focus we have going forward. It's going to require a partnership, though. It has to be a partnership with us and the Department of Commerce and Kansas businesses. So we all have to work together. We can't do that on our own. Our universities and colleges are hubs of innovation. They spark new economic activity for our state. That's one of the goals of our strategic plan in terms of economic prosperity is how can we partner with the private sector? How do we get more dollars flowing into our state than are flowing out? And how do we help Kansas businesses create jobs? There's also been discussion as of late that the value of a college degree may not be worth it. I know you've probably heard some of that. And so I put on page 5 just a chart. It hasn't been true for a number of years that an associate or baccalaureate degree has a premium. So it has had a premium for a number of years, and it continues to be more of a premium. And it's not so much that the wages keep increasing for our graduates, if you plug in cost of living. It's that for people with a high school diploma only, or if you're unfortunate and do not have a high school diploma, your wages are actually flat to decreasing almost all the time. Once in a while, we can show a little bit of an uptick if the economy really gets to going, but generally, if you don't have some I'm not talking about a baccalaureate degree for everybody, but some post-secondary education or training. Might be a welding certificate, might be an electrical degree, might be an apprenticeship, could be a baccalaureate degree or on beyond. Those wages are more robust. And I've put a chart in there that just shows you the average Kansas wage. If you think median wages of all Kansas 25 years and older, that's whether you've had 1 year experience or 50 years experience, 41,000, and you can see where the attainment levels put you there. And then when we talk about how we're going to help Kansas businesses in our third pillar that addresses economic prosperity, we know that the universities and colleges have invested in certain areas that they've already built up capacity. You could probably name them without this chart, but you know that Wichita is going to have some influence in the aviation area. The University of Kansas, obviously, with health and medical research. Pittsburgh State works in the plastics area, and of course we know that Kansas State University and their biosecurity and global food systems have capacity there. Those are the kind of businesses we'll likely recruit to Kansas, is where we have strength and where the geography also makes sense. So I'll just go right to the fiscal year 2023 appropriations. If you look at, if you look at page 8, I wanted to let you know that our statutory responsibility is to be an advocate on behalf of the entire system. So you should hear from the board for not only the universities, which we govern, but also the community and technical colleges, which we coordinate. So you'll hear what those budget asks are and where we are right now in terms of the governor's budget. The governor did recommend additional funds for state universities, for student financial aid, Washburn University, and also the community and technical colleges. Washburn University is unique, as you know, because they're a municipal university, and we coordinate them similar to the community and technical colleges. They have their own board and set their own tuition, but we coordinate them as the Board of Regents. And then we also have an enhancement for the Board of Regents office. Now, on page 10, the governor recommended that $45.7 million a year for state-based support in the state universities, but with that, a tuition freeze. And so I wanted to just show you a chart there of what we've done in terms of tuition the last few years. And if you've looked, University of Kansas hasn't raised tuition for 3 years. So I would say over the last 3 years for sure, and even as you look at some of the previous years, the tuition increases really probably haven't kept pace with the CPI rather, but we've asked our universities to look for efficiencies within the model. Now, some would say, well, you've also had a slight decrease in enrollment. Well, sometimes your costs do go down for a decrease in enrollment, and many times they do not. If the drop is such where you had a classroom of 20 students, and the next year you have 18, your costs really don't go down, but your revenue does decrease because of tuition. If you look at the past, on page 11, I've put in a line graph on, here's what the state general fund has done over time since 2009. And you can see that as we took that drop, it remained relatively flat for a number of years. Now you can see the maintenance of effort funds were put in. That was that 40-some million. They took 10 million of the Promise Act out of the maintenance of effort you did, and then it's 40-some million for the rest of the system. Some of that went to the universities. As you look at that, what is going on now with the maintenance of effort is there's a waiver for this year, which was half. And those waivers, the criteria of that was granted to states that had financial hardship. That waiver has not been decided on, and if you want more information of that, I think the budget director, Adam Proffitt, could help you there. But that would be in this current fiscal year. And then you can see the governor's budget gives us an enhancement. But if you think about where we would end up at $715 million, back in 2009, we were at 657. So there hasn't been a lot of, even if all of this budget were funded, there hasn't been a tremendous amount of growth in state support over time. The way we calculated the request, the 45.7, is we did look at the current cut that the state universities had. Now, the coordinated institutions did not have that cut. It was restored fully. The university cut was not fully restored, so we calculated that. We also took a cost of living on the general use budget, which is state general fund support and tuition. And then we thought about a 2% tuition increase, and so we brought that down with that ask. So if that part came, if this 45.7 million stayed in the budget, we would be able to keep tuition flat for Kansas families, and that's a board priority. Page 12, as Shirley pointed out, the governor recommended $25 million for capital renewal, which was the board's ask as well. I wanted to just take a moment to really talk about how the board and the universities are addressing deferred maintenance. As you can look on the next page, on page 13, you see that deferred maintenance backlog. And we thank you for the Education Building Fund. That is the $1 million in property tax that supports our deferred maintenance. But that $1 million is not nearly enough to support the maintenance of the buildings. And the board has said we're going to have to start adding to that. The universities have put some in. They have some in-kind expenditures as well that we use to help with the maintenance issue. But if we did nothing, if we just stay the course and do nothing, you know, over just a few years, we think we're going to be almost at $5 billion in terms of our deferred maintenance liability. And that's something that the board has said we've got to get out ahead of. Here's what needs to happen in my view, though. We're going to need all of us. We're going to need your help to get there. We're going to have the universities focus on this as well. And then I think we can get to where we can have these buildings in a state of good repair over time. We didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out overnight, but it's going to take effort over a number of years. Information technology infrastructure, the governor recommended $20 million for IT infrastructure. The universities are focusing that on cybersecurity and those upgrades addressing that issue. I don't need to tell you about all the threats in the cybersecurity landscape at this time. We've had institutions in neighboring states, pretty good sized institutions, have to shut down for a week or two because they were hit with ransomware. People got into the systems. We have a large database at the board office as well. People are trying to get into your databases all the time. They're trying to get in your systems all the time. We do extensive training, but we do need to really focus on some information technology infrastructure if we're going to continue to keep all those folks at bay. The governor also recommended funding for the Kansas Access Partnership, which is state financial aid, $25 million. But it would, again, require, similar to the engineering initiative that was so successful, it would require a match as well, and really have the foundations and endowment match those dollars so that we would get a double bang really for our dollar there. I've put a chart on page 16. You can see a graph of where we rank with other states. That's out of our state higher ed report in terms of state need-based aid. And we're one of the lower states, and here's how that happened. A number of years ago, Kansas, it's been quite a few years ago, Kansas actually funded the state universities relatively high, so tuition was disproportionately low when you compared us to other states. As the funding stopped, then tuition began to come up, and what other states had done at that time is always put need-based aid into the state at the state level so that could be addressed. We didn't do that over time, and so we just fell behind there. But that kind of gives you an idea of where we rank in terms of nationally. I don't think we're going to have long-term success as you look at the way our population is changing if we don't address need-based aid and help more families access post-secondary education. The Promise Act is actually a good start on that as well for the two-year colleges because it's a last dollar in program where family or students can access those dollars. this need-based aid would help our universities as well. We have $1 million in for National Guard tuition assistance. The Guard tells me that helps them recruit. We pay for those. They determine the eligibility, and then that's tuition assistance. For our coordinated institutions, Governor recommended $1.5 million for a total state grant of $14 million for Washburn universities. And the community and technical colleges, we expect more enrollment in the Excel and Career Technical Education, or Senate Bill 155, and that's an additional $2.5 million. And then we have, you've heard from Shirley about the gap funding on the tiered and non-tiered courses for community and technical colleges. The capital outlay state aid has stayed flat for a number of years, and so there's $1 million enhancement for that program. That's 16 of our institutions that are two-year colleges. And then the two-year colleges came together, recommended to the board, and the board agreed for some one-time projects for expanding technical programs to the tune of about $15 million. Page 19, we've asked for restoration of the Board of Regents office, the cut, and we've asked for a couple of positions, one to help with our deferred maintenance initiative, and the other to assist with the Promise Act. So the Promise Act requires that a student lives and works in Kansas after they complete their program, which I think, you know, that's a fine idea. The issue with any of the golden handcuff programs or programs where you claw back if someone leaves the state is that someone has to follow up every student. And so there is an administrative burden with those types of programs. And then other key budget items, we've just outlined the Department of Commerce funds, as you've discussed. There's also some funding in the Department of Ed budget to help with the career and technical education students' transportation. And then there's the governor recommended 5% pay plan. And we're thankful that that was pushed out to on a merit basis. For our universities, it's always much better if we can use those dollars for a merit pool. So with that, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Blake. One question. On the funding that the governor recommended going through Commerce, the match grants, wouldn't that be better handled at the Regents level than going through Commerce?
So that would be hard for me to answer. The Department of Commerce is our full partner, so I don't mind that the funding is in the Department of Commerce, but it is for the Regent institutions, and so that would be at your discretion where to put those dollars. We've worked very closely with the Secretary on many economic development projects, though, and so we would probably include Commerce in those discussions no matter where the funding was located.
I'm just curious if, you know, if that was asked of you as far as how or where that should go. You wasn't part of that?
We had an ask for the smaller economic development line item. The governor said we're going to fund that, but put that in the Department of Commerce for that oversight. They also did the oversight on the engineering initiative, so we have a history of working with the Department of Commerce. The $195 million was came out of the governor's budget. We did not make that request, and the governor put that in the Department of Commerce.
Okay, and then the other question on these tuition rates. I don't like seeing percentages. I like to see dollar amounts because I think they're very misleading. I mean,
yeah, we can get you the hard dollar amount because for Fort Hayes, 3% is not very expensive.
Right, compared to 3% at KU.
Yeah.
I just, if you could get them for sometime, I think that'd be
you bet. We'll get you the
good to see.
dollars.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back on your capital renewal initiatives, we're talking about raising obsolete buildings. What are we talking about there? How many are obsolete in our colleges? How many are we talking about?
Well, a number of them would appear to be obsolete. Some of them are historic, though. So we're going to keep those. You know, we've said, can we knock down 15%? You know, that are what I classify as old but not antique. You know, and have a deferred maintenance liability on that facility that it just costs more to fix up than it does to do something else. And then as our footprint in terms of enrollment shrank just a little bit, we also did a space utilization study at the board. We need to improve our space utilization, and so we think a part of that is raising some of those structures. I know the universities could talk about their own campus and what buildings they see as possibly fitting that category.
And the governor put in $25 million. Is that going to help that part
Well,
of that?
that would be, that'd really be just for, I guess it could, but it would be primarily for the maintenance of existing facilities. We would like to see, perhaps through the Sparks process, or we'd like to see some one-time dollars be put in to raise some facilities, because I think, to your point, it makes sense to shrink that footprint.
Thank you.
It actually helps our deferred maintenance liability, too.
That's correct.
Senator Fagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was kind of looking at the deferred maintenance part, trying to understand the past, how we could have got to that point, and the universities haven't been addressing that. Is that correct? Yep. So my question to you is, when we look at all the universities, has some of them took care of their issue? Is there some that hasn't? Trying to get a feel of who's been
good and who's bad.
who's been good, who's been bad.
So if I were to say who's on kind of the naughty list on that, would be the universities that are old. So if you have old historic buildings, if you started and you look at, and I'm talking about Kansas State University and the University of Kansas, that liability, those are much harder to maintain. And so if you came to the game a little later, or if you have a much smaller footprint, then it's easier. I think we've thought about how did we get here. I think at one time, this has been 20, 25 years ago, people believed always that the state would come forward, and some states did. I think South Dakota said, we're going to put in 2% of the total cost of the buildings into a maintenance fund. You know, it came right from the state. Universities didn't do that. So everybody was waiting on someone to help. There was a thought that the Educational Building Fund was, that was what I think the legislature thought, well, that's our response, that's our response to it. It just wasn't near adequate enough. So I suppose there's plenty of blame to go around in terms of where we are right now. What we want to do is say, okay, we need to stop the escalation of deferred maintenance. And we've got to get ahead of that. And how do we do that? And so that's why we did a plan to determine, number one, how much deferred maintenance do we actually have? And two, what's our space utilization? And then how do we marry those two plans together? And to Senator Alley's point, then raise some buildings that are no longer needed. That'll cut down the liability. Do a building prioritization. Some buildings we need to prioritize, need to be nicer actually than other buildings. Some maybe, sometimes an older building, it's okay if it's got a mid-tier rating. You know, I kind of liken it to, we're not going to bring them up to this standard of perfection. I would liken that a little bit to a classic car. So if you had a 64.5 Mustang that was perfect, and at a car auction, that would be what one of these buildings would be if it were in perfect condition. We don't have to get to perfect. We just need to get to a state of good repair on many of our buildings.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Blake, thank you for your presentation, too. I was wondering, you mentioned about students from out of state. It's been a positive number of people coming in. Do you measure that as freshmen or as graduates? You know, I wonder how many kids come here all excited to do it, and then all of a sudden, by their sophomore year, decide to go home. So I just wondering what kind of numbers was in that kind of thing.
We can pull that number for you. We have a robust database. We'll tell you how many we retain. Our retention rates have improved, and so from first year to second year, it happens. But I would say I'd want to look at the numbers on that question specifically, but many times the students where we have attrition, if you're an out-of-state student, and if you happen to be paying non-resident rates, you probably came from a family with a lot of support. So your chances of completing actually are pretty high because you have this support structure. If you're a first-generation student, meaning your parents didn't graduate from college, you don't know the system, and perhaps you're from a very modest income home, then if you have any bumps in the road, we're finding, you have a greater chance of dropping out. So I'll get you those numbers from our database, exactly how many out-of-state students we lose from the freshman to sophomore year.
Thank you.
Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Blake. Do you know if Treasury guidelines on ARPA money or the CARES, whatever the current CARES money is, would allow us to put some money into deferred maintenance? And if so, I know we just had orientation on some of the Spark subcommittees, and they're taking ideas or proposals that will be prioritized. Do we know if Regents have inputted anything on that to see if we could get a head start on some of our deferred maintenance?
We're actually submitting a proposal for a tear down to the Sparks Committee. And in terms of all the rules and regulations to that federal money, Elaine Frisbee knows, but I can't recite those for you. I would tell you that brings me to another point, though. When we took the cut and Governor Kelly did a swap, if you guys remember that, we had the Gear 1 money, which was federal money, and we didn't have any idea what the state budget was going to be with the pandemic. And so the governor cut us an equal amount out of our state funding and replaced it with the Gear 1 money, okay, at the universities. I just want to let you know, it is an even swap dollar-wise. It's not an even swap in terms of the back-end tracking dollars, because the amount of bureaucracy, and the universities can tell you, to make sure and track those federal dollars and link them to COVID expenditures and all the things that go on with that are significant.
Complicated. Just one comment, Mr. Chairman. I had hoped we would, and I think everybody in the budget office and all of us had hoped we'd heard on the waiver for maintenance of effort. So just
We do too.
Just a thing to have in there. If somehow that is a problem, I would want to know what the regents think, if we have to put more money in, or if that complicates how we're looking at state general funds. And I know we don't have to decide that yet, but that could be another complexity out there that we'll have to deal with in the budgeting process yet this spring.
It is getting very, very late, and I believe those dollars would need to be spent this fiscal year as well. And so the longer, we've been to the website to check it. I see some states have withdrawn their waiver, but the later it goes, the harder it is to make sure that we are ready for that. We do have a plan for that if that would happen, but we're just, again, waiting. We thought it'd be done by now.
Blake, we're kind of running short on time, but the 5% pay plan, now, would that money just go to Regents and you determine, because I know in the past we've had issues and some folks got raises at the universities and some folks didn't. And I want to make sure that we're able to cover, you know, everyone.
So it is in a merit pool. So that would mean that some folks would get raises and some folks would not. Or not everyone, everybody might get a little raise. That would depend on the supervisor at the university, but everybody wouldn't get the same raise. So that is different than saying we're going to give everybody, no matter what their performance is, a 5% raise. This is, as it is currently in the governor's budget, it's not designed that way. And I would tell you, Senator, we would rather have it in a merit-based pool than in everybody gets the same raise.
Well, I just, I look at some of the other agencies that we have, and I think you got to be really careful because you're liable to lose a lot of maybe your lower paid folks that didn't get raises, and you may be struggling. I know some of the hospitals, a friend of mine was in the hospital and they had to clean their own room for a week and a half. They can't hire janitorial or certain positions, and I just caution you that we don't want to have a crisis at the universities because a lot of people left. I think our most important thing we can do today is retention.
I would agree, and I think that as you talk to the presidents and chancellor, they would agree as well. You know, those universities and colleges are like small cities. They have to operate. So there's a whole host of people in the trades. There's a number of secretarial staff. Like you say, some don't have robust wages, but really the merit system, they're going to look at how's the performance been, and so that's where we'd rather stay.
Well, thank you, Blake. Appreciate you being here today. Next, we'll have Dr. Rick Mumma with Wichita State University. Welcome, committee, Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, for the opportunity to be here today, talk about Wichita State. You should have this handout, I believe, in front of you. I just want to walk through those different slides. The first slide on page 2 really talks about who we are as an institution and our strategic plan and what we're focusing on. I think it's important for you to understand that we're an urban public research university, and what that means is two main things. We're providing affordable access for students and to help our community solve problems through research, through creative, innovative activities, and other service initiatives. And you'll see on that slide we have basically 3 priorities. One is affordable, accessible education. The other one is to help businesses with a talent pipeline. And the third one is to increase economic prosperity for our community through research and other activities. If you look on slide 3, there really is a point of difference and I think opportunity that I want to point out to you about our student population. So 1 out of 4 of all of our undergraduate students is an underrepresented minority. 1 out of 5 students who are Pell eligible enrolled in the 6 state schools are enrolled at Wichita State. We're on track of becoming a Hispanic serving institution by the end of this decade, probably sooner, especially if we put policies in place to move that forward. And then the key thing here in our region, in South Central Kansas, in Sedgwick County, there's about 83,000 individuals between the ages of 25 and 35. They have the highest educational attainment is that of a high school diploma. And we know with this new economy, they're going to have something more beyond that, either at WSU Tech or a 4-year degree or even graduate education at Wichita State. If you go to the next slide, slide 4, because we've been prioritizing these students, this mix of students at our institution and with need-based aid and other support, we are growing. We've had the highest enrollments in 30 years. You can see at that slide, we had a little dip with COVID, but we're back to pre-pandemic numbers in terms of students at Wichita State. And if you look at the next slide, slide 5, it's because we also have been making sure that we're holding tuition low and making sure that it's a good value for students. And if you look at all of our peers and the research institutions in our region, you can see that we are the lowest, and we still believe that we're able to provide a good quality education, even though we're keeping that price point low to make sure that we address the different student needs in our community. Blake, or Dr. Flanders mentioned earlier about need-based aid. This is really important for our institution. It's one of the reasons why we're growing. We're bringing in these new populations of students. If you can see on page 6, that where we are as a state in terms of the amount of investment in need-based aid. Even though Nebraska is less, they actually are per capita providing more aid for their students. And all the other states, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times what we're investing in our students in this state. And these are the individuals who are low-income students who just need that extra amount of money to fill the gap to come to school. So that's the first priority in terms of making sure that we provide an affordable and accessible education. In terms of the second priority is helping our businesses fill a talent pipeline. If you look on slide 7, we know from just looking at our student body and our mix of population in this state that we need more people. We need more people getting educated and staying in Wichita. So several years ago, we started what we call a Shocker City program, where we provide in-state tuition in the metropolitan areas of Kansas City, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Dallas-Fort Worth, and the Houston metro areas. It's where most of our growth is coming. The idea is to get these people to Kansas, get them connected to an applied learning experience, and hopefully they'll stay. And right now, about 70% of our undergraduate students stay in Wichita or in Kansas, mostly in the region, after they graduate. If you look at slide 8 and 9, this is the reason why this is important. We rank very high in STEM jobs in the metro area of Wichita, but also in Kansas. And if you look on slide 9, we're number 3 in terms of number of engineers per 1,000 employees, just behind Houston and San Jose, California. It's important for us to continue to meet these needs because it keeps our businesses in the Wichita region, in the greater Wichita area, but also helps us attract more employers to the area and to the state. If you look at slide 10, we've had a lot of success in this area with this model, recruiting new individuals to the university and making sure they're connected to applied learning experiences with employers. And now over 5,000 of our students are earning $26 million working alongside our businesses, not only on our campus, but also in our city. So the third priority is increasing economic prosperity. And all of these things I've talked about are really related and interrelated to the third priority of economic prosperity. So you probably remember us talking along the way about the Innovation Campus at Wichita State University. Back in 2012, we started talking about how can we create this model of supporting the business pipeline, getting more students in the system. And so we talked about bringing businesses together, and if you look on the next slide, you'll see what the map looks like of the campus. The left side is the old part of the campus, and the right side is the Innovation Campus. We actually almost completed that campus, that side of the campus. There's only 3 plots of land left that we're actually needing now to work to bring other partners to campus. But if you look on the next slide, you'll see there's 40 now businesses and partners working on that side of campus. Some of them have their entire headquarters there, others have offices there. But the point is, they're working with our students, they're staying, our students are staying in the area and because of this particular relationship, and they're earning wages that they can keep and help them support them in their education. You look at slide 14, but we know we need to do some more, and we're working on 3 main different things, and I'll talk about each one of those. The first one is around aviation. We're also working around digital transformation and the health sciences. So slide 15 is the NIAR Works program. So you may be familiar with our modification program of aircraft, of commercial aircraft that we started working on this past year. This is a silver lining from COVID. You know, there's not too many of those, But one of them is that, many people are not traveling, particularly international, but we're all sitting around ordering things online and want those things delivered to our homes. So the cargo capacity needs to increase. Through our research in the National Institute for Aviation Research, we've figured out how to modify 777, Boeing 777 aircraft. There's about 500 of them parked out in the western part of this country. There's no place for them to go. But we have all this cargo need. And so we figured that out, and now we have taken delivery of, I think, 4 that we're working on to start making those modifications. The most incredible thing about this project is bringing that kind of work back to Wichita. That used to be there. We used to have all kinds of modification work in Wichita. But this provides another opportunity. We believe by the time this is up and running, and we're going to start in Wichita, and we have plans to provide places to do this in Salina and also in Topeka, there'll be more than 1,000 jobs, professional jobs, and hundreds of jobs for our students to work alongside those professionals to get their skills and make them more job ready the moment they graduate. We have a program that we started with Wichita State, WSU Tech, NIAR, and this modification program where students are recruited into an earn and learn kind of environment. So they get paid while they're working and going to school, and then they get the certifications, and in some cases they will transfer to Wichita State for a higher level of education in that program. We believe this is a good model of recruiting students to Wichita and to in our particular region. Slide 16 is about the health sciences. So KU and Wichita State have been talking for about 3 or 4 years about how can we combine forces to develop a true academic health science center in Wichita. I'm biased. I was trained in the largest health science center in the world, the Texas Medical Center. I can't tell you how enriching that was for me as a student, but I also knew about the innovation and the research that spun out in that. And I continued to work in that environment for about 10 years prior to coming to Wichita. So KU and Wichita State are working on a plan to bring this to reality, hopefully, in the core of our city. Any city that has something like this at their core is growing. There's lots of examples of sizes of cities like Wichita or larger where they bring all of their interprofessional training together in the healthcare area and work on research and also biomedical kinds of interactions. One of the things that really proved to me that this is something that we can do, and that was the development of the molecular diagnostic laboratory that we stood up in a matter of months at the beginning of the pandemic. Many of you have benefited from the testing that we've done in our facility. We believe that those kinds of things will be able to continue, and collaboration with KU will even make it more of a vibrant possibility. Slide 17, if you look at that, that's a picture of the east side of the campus, which we call the Innovation Campus. We've been focusing pretty heavily on digital transformation. I like to talk about this in the 3-legged stool. The first leg is degree programs and certificates for our students to bring them into this new digital age. And over the last couple of years, through industry feedback and input, have developed about 14 new degree programs, everything from digital science, data analytics, cybersecurity, homeland security, digital arts, all kinds of different certificates to match those particular fields, and started developing really intense programming around that. It's where a lot of our enrollment growth has come in those particular areas. The second leg of the stool is the innovation and research side. So Deloitte Smart Factories getting ready to open their facility. You'll see that labeled there on that picture. NetApp is getting ready to open their facility, their headquarters, also on that side of the campus. Other examples in NIAR and our digital research that we've been doing and the digital twin research in aviation, all of these things are coming together to create a true data digital ecosystem on that side of campus for our community to help our businesses move forward. And we just broke ground on the National Institute for Research and Digital Transformation. This is the third leg of the stool. what's learned in the classroom, what's learned in the research with our faculty and our students and industry partners will be tested and evaluated in that facility. Hopefully some of them will spin off into new businesses and create more jobs for our community. So that's very exciting, and that particular part of the campus has really become really vibrant. Okay, if you look on slide 18, this is the most important slide I can leave with you. So, as I said earlier, we started talking about this new model of education at Wichita State back in 2012. We developed a strategic plan in 2013 to help guide us through that process, and then we started talking about the Innovation Campus. And you can see every year beyond that, the new businesses, partners that have joined our campus and helped us move our university forward. And the three metrics that we look at really closely is, since the primary reason for this was to get more students in the door connected to business and industry, how many of those students are actually working in those fields and how much are they making? And I said earlier, we have about 5,000 students that we can document now that are earning about $26 million a year. This is really key for our student population as well, because a lot of them are low income, high need students, so these are wages that they can keep in their pockets to help support their education going forward. One of the remarkable things about the university, for years, we only brought in about $50 million of external research funding. This past fiscal year, we surpassed $180 million, and we're getting ready to surpass $200 million by the next year. So this not only is bringing new opportunities for new knowledge and ideas, but also working with industry to help solve some of their problems. And then the last one is the graph that shows you our growth from along the I-35 corridor. Now we have a significant number of students coming to Wichita, getting connected to business and industry, and staying here after they graduate. So slide 19, of course we are supportive of the Regents' request and want to do everything we can to support that, but there's four things I really want to point out that really will make a difference at the university. Dr. Flanders talked about need-based aid. We started prioritizing some of our state general fund into need-based aid several years ago, and it's one of the reasons why we're growing. We believe if there's another investment in the state, like some of the surrounding states, that will help us continue to grow. These are individuals who are currently not in the system who would have the opportunity to come to college if they had this particular funding. So it's students who are mostly Pell eligible. They may also qualify for some of our merit aid that we have, our institutional aid that we have, but they still have a gap. And so that's the dollars that we're talking about here for need-based aid. I talked earlier about our modification program. That's the MRO that you see listed there. That will help us grow jobs, keep jobs in our area, be very transformational as we go forward. So any kind of support for that particular program will be helpful. And then I also mentioned the Health Sciences Education Center that we're working with KU on. We're actually going to submit a joint Sparks proposal to help support that particular project, but any other kind of support would be helpful as well as we move that project forward. And then the last thing is on recentering that's been mentioned here. This is in particular an issue for WSU Tech. When you look at the cumulative effect of the shortfall that they've experienced, it's about $24 million. They continue to grow. You know, they're the largest technical college in the state, and any kind of recentering of that particular gap would be very helpful. So that's my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mumma. I think what we'll do is we'll hold questions till the end. That way, all the universities will have a chance to go over their presentation. Thank you. Next, we'll have Chancellor Doug Gerard from KU and KUMC. Welcome, committee, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Thanks for having us today and have a chance to present. I'll see if I can get us back on time a little bit. You should have some handouts as well. And I wanted to just cover a few things today. Quickly, just talk a little bit about who we are, and then maybe, as you've heard some discussion already from Dr. Flanders and Dr. Mumma, a little bit about the national trends that are happening in enrollment. And then talk really about not just our enrollment, but then how the university as a whole is helping to drive the economy of the state as well. If you go to slide 3 there, you can see really our mission as we view it is to educate the leaders of tomorrow, to help build healthy and vibrant communities, and to make discoveries that really change the world. And have a number of strategies to do that. But certainly some of the headwinds that you've been hearing about today, when you look at slide 4, is really just what's happening nationally. And it's really, in this slide actually says graduation rates. It's actually graduation numbers. So there's 1 million fewer high school students in college today than there were in 2010. And that trend will continue for another 15 years. And as you look at that slide, any state that is in any shade of blue is in a declining high school graduation state for through 2035. And so, and it certainly is a bit more challenging in the Northeast and the Midwest. And as I said, that's going to actually accelerate for a few years. So a lot of the work that you're going to hear from us and my colleagues is the work that we're doing to really combat that trend. And given the incredibly short supply of workforce, that's going to be really important for our economy, for us to be able to figure out how to continue to import students, as you've heard about already. If you look at slide 5, our enrollment has been really quite flat since 2012, which in this environment is a relative victory. We also took a bit of a dip in 20 with a drop of almost 3%. That was about 7% freshman class and then a lot of international students. That rebounded this year. Our freshman class is back to pre-pandemic size, and we recovered about half of the international students this year, but we're still down in that market. Unique to KU is our fairly high percentage of out-of-state students. So we're at about 41% in our freshman class this year, and that has grown slightly over the years. And it's a very talented group. Our freshman class has one of the highest GPAs that we've got on recorded history. And when you look at slide 6, you really see the distribution. But those out-of-state students come from all 50 states and over 100 countries. What has been an effort of ours, not unlike what Dr. Mumma was describing, is how do we help keep those out-of-state students in-state when they finish? And so we've had a number of programs in place over the last 5 years or so, and we've been able to increase that number of out-of-state graduates staying in the state from 25% to almost 40% this year. In 2020, we had 1,100 out-of-state students stay in the state of Kansas to take jobs here with a direct salary impact of $72 million. So those efforts are starting to pay off. We know that that's going to be really important as we go forward, both to maintain enrollments, but also to help build that workforce here in the state. If you look at slide 7, we really have worked hard to create connections across industry. We have about 3,000 industry partners right now, from startup companies to the big companies like Ford and Exxon and Honeywell. We graduate, we give out about 7,200 degrees every single year, and we continue to push for our faculty's research to continue to develop and commercialize. And we've got about 44 active startup companies at this point in time that have come out of KU research. And we have also worked very closely with our chambers, our communities to attract companies. And we've attracted about 30 companies into our system over the last 10 years to work closely with our faculty. But quite honestly, they come here for our students as much as they do for our faculty. And then on slide 8, really you see a rendering of what's underway right now, which is on our West Campus, our KU Innovation Park. We're in construction of the 3rd phase of that right now, which will open up later this year. That park continues to grow. We have over 30 companies in it. We've got about 380 jobs there right now associated with that, and it continues to grow. And really what drives that is our research enterprise, which also has grown every year for the last 6 years. In excess now of $400 million a year that we bring into the state of Kansas to conduct research. That funds 4,000 jobs, just the research enterprise alone, and puts about $50 million a year into Kansas vendors in 65 counties. So again, continuing to work to draw things into the state of Kansas, using the university as a leverage for that. From the medical center side, over 50% of the physicians in the state of Kansas came through KU. And that's due in part to our campuses, both Kansas City, Salina, and Wichita. Our School of Nursing has connectivity to 8 community colleges to allow those community colleges to actually provide a bachelor's degree in nursing, the BSN, which is what the hospitals prefer. And that can happen at their community college, so that those students can actually stay in their communities. We've expanded through the health system with sites now in Great Bend and Topeka, as well as our Kansas City site, and we have area health education centers in Hayes, Pittsburgh, and Kansas City. And of course, our telemedicine system is throughout the state, and certainly came in very helpful during the pandemic. A few of the things that we do to help support the infrastructure of the state, on slide 10, you can see the Law Enforcement Training Center. We train over 8,000 police officers every year. Our Fire Rescue Training Institute trains over 8,000 firefighters every year. The Kansas Geological Survey monitors 1,400 wells across the state for water supply and many, many other things. And we've worked very closely. The School of Business has developed a Red Tire program, which works with rural communities to find buyers for small businesses in rural communities when somebody retires. And we've, to point, saved 76 businesses through that process. So really very active across the entire state. On slide 11, I did want to touch just for a minute on the impact that athletics has, not just on our universities, but really our region. And the fact that we, like K-State, our athletics departments are essentially self-funded. So we have no student dollars going into that. We have no state dollars going into that. And yet they turn around and purchase from us the scholarships, the housing, the dining, and the resources from our university to the tune of over $20 million a year that they put back into the university for us. But really why we have been successful on that out-of-state recruitment has everything to do with our national presence, and our athletics department has everything to do with creating that national presence for us and connecting us to our donors across the state. Slide 12, you see our historic funding, just a reflection of what Dr. Flanders shared at the system level. It's certainly true at the institution level, and you can see we're still at about $13 million lower than we were in 2008 in actual dollars. But if you put a CPI on that, that's a difference of about $100 million from where we were in 2008 in terms of buying power. And that certainly had an impact on tuition. We talked about that just briefly, but if you look at slide 13, you can see that we've been able to hold our tuition flat the last 3 years, but really almost the last 6 years with just very little fluctuation there. And we're certainly supportive of the governor's proposal that would allow us to do that for and yet another year. If you look at slide 14, you can see the breakdown of our budget, which really the state appropriation now makes up 17% of that budget. Tuition now makes up 22% of that budget. And that total budget is about $1.4 billion across the entire system. The challenges that have been created with sort of the flat state funding, inflation, and trying to hold our tuition flat for affordability purposes really has created this situation where we needed to be incredibly good stewards of the resources. And if you look at slide 15, you can see a number of the things that we've done to do that. But one of those is we've actually we've internally cut our budget 12 of the last 15 years. And that's been just necessary out of some of the challenges financially, including current year. We cut $25 million in Lawrence alone out of our operating budget. And that has translated over the last 10 years. Our number of faculty is down about 11%, and that's a direct reflection of that, despite our tuition, or excuse me, our enrollments being essentially flat. We certainly have a number of efforts going right now to try and diversify and create additional revenue streams as well to take some of that pressure off and to create more efficiencies within and across our campuses. We also are retooling our student recruitment processes, trying to maximize the scholarship dollars that we have to maximize recruitment and then continue to enhance our donor relations to build additional resources for student aid through that process. So we really, at this point, really look at everything we do from a return on investment from a taxpayer perspective, and know that we have some additional opportunity there, but certainly very fully supportive of the governor's proposal that would really help us continue down this path. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for some questions, or we're going to hold questions to the end. I can do
I
that.
think we'll wait till 4 days. Thank
Thank
you,
you. You bet.
Chancellor. Next, we'll have Dr. Tisa Mason, Fort Hays State University. Welcome, committee, Tisa.
Thank you so much. Good morning to you as well. At Fort Hays State University, we believe tomorrow is made by thinkers and doers who turn ideas into action. We turn challenges into opportunities, and we are at our best when the going gets rough. Our 30-plus years of experience in providing educational opportunities to place-bound students served us well during the past challenging year. As just one of 6 universities in the world to earn the United States Distance Learning Association certification, our faculty were well prepared to teach and interact with our students beyond the traditional classroom. This allowed us to keep the lights on and the doors open. We managed our finances responsibly without furloughing or terminating employees, and we experienced a record for students graduating. We work responsibly to respond to the economic concerns of the state, and most especially the rural communities of our region. Thanks to a grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, we opened a regional de-escalation center to help law enforcement officers resolve potentially dangerous confrontations. In understanding the rural communities our students are likely to serve, our nurse practitioners do 25% of clinical hours in rural communities and train in over 40 rural care simulations. We are focused on the economic future of our region. For instance, the Kansas Hispanic population has grown 25% since 2012. Recognizing this growth, we created the Hispanic College Institute, a free 3-day residential program that prepares high school students to enter college and succeed, and enter at college and succeed in any college. We served 324 Hispanic students in 2009. In 2020, that number climbed over 1,100 students. Our Transfer and Military Center encourages degree completion through programs like our Kansas Community College Guarantee. Complete an Associates of Arts or Science at a Kansas Community College, and you have fulfilled our general education requirements. Our partnership with the Kansas Army National Guard provides a pathway to a tuition-free degree. The Bureau of Labor Statistics expects computer and IT jobs to grow 13% between 2020 and 2030. We have built a Kansas computing talent pipeline with 7 certificate programs, 8 graduate programs, and undergraduate majors with 8 different concentrations. We are currently serving over 400 traditional students, as well as many mid-career professionals looking to grow their computing skills. And near and dear to my heart, and key to our success at Fort Hays State University has been our longstanding affordability. Fort Hays has the most affordable tuition among peers, and our online program is equally cost-effective. We recently used metrics provided by the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity to review the return on investment. We found a positive return on every single Fort Hays program. We are very grateful for every dollar that has been designated for Fort Hays State University, and we thank you for your support. We've seen a number of successes at Fort Hays in the past year. Our Transfer Connect program offers special services between community college academic advisors and our talented Fort Hays success coaches for transfer students while the student is in the community college. We measure our success with what happens after our students graduate. A survey of graduates from 2020 through 2021 reported 95% of respondents, and I want to pause and say we had an 83% response rate, indicated that they were either employed or continuing their education with graduate work. We're seeing positive numbers in high-demand positions. 72% of our nursing graduates stay in Kansas, and 90% of our APRNs work in rural or underserved areas. Our social work program has grown from 100 in 2015 to more than 300 today. And thanks to our new MSW online program, social workers wanting to advance their career can stay in place in the rural communities while they pursue their advanced degree. Computing jobs are in high demand. 97% of our computing majors report employment after graduation with an average starting salary of between $65,000 and $70,000. We're always seeking ways to fill the talent pipeline in Kansas. Two key tools in this endeavor are our Small Business Development Center Network, the SBDC, and our Docking Institute. Federally funded and overseen by Fort Hays, the SBDC is a network of 12 centers across the state which work with small businesses to achieve success in today's marketplace. Every dollar invested in this network generates $45 in funding partners' ROI. The Docking Institute facilitates public policy among governmental and nonprofit entities, providing the research needed for economic development. Now, I'm often asked in these presentations what Fort Hays would do with additional funding, and this year I have come with an answer even before you ask. We're prepared to launch a technology business incubator to leverage existing synergies on campus and create a supportive cybersecurity environment for small businesses. Utilizing the SBD Center's outreach, the Docking Institute's research, and an annual allocation of $500,000, we could provide this much-needed service to the lifeblood of our rural communities and small businesses. This effort is an initiative of the Kansas Board of Regents Pillar 3 Strategic Plan. In closing, I want to underscore our presence matters. We're the second largest employer in Ellis County, providing an economic benefit to a 5-county area. We provide high-quality, nationally recognized programs at a reasonable cost. Our 30 years of experience in offering award-winning online education helps us reach place-bound students in Kansas and around the world. I hope you'll take time to read my written testimony, which provides much more detail. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Mason. I guess we'll do some questions if you folks have time. Okay. I think we'll start out with Dr. Mumma with Wichita State. Thank you for being here today. One of the questions that I have is on this NIAR project. You said once you get going in Wichita, then you're going to expand to Salina and Topeka. So when somebody comes in, gets their training and gets their degree, where will they go? I mean, would they end up like in Salina? Are we going to do these in 3 locations, or would they stay there at Wichita State? Or
3 different locations, and so students from that area of Salina would have the opportunity to work in those jobs, as well as students in Topeka. Most of them will be in Wichita, but there'll be 3 different independent sites doing the same kind of work.
So I guess where I'm a little confused is I attend and get my degree there in Wichita State. I can stay on there and work, or?
Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. I mean, this is a long-term project, so this is to help sustain it for years to come. I mean, there's, as I said, there's 500 aircraft that potentially could be modified.
So like at Wichita State, once you get those folks trained and you're fully employed there, then you'll open up the one in Salina, or you're kind of in conjunction, or?
I believe the one in Salina will be close after getting Wichita up and running. Topeka will come a little bit later.
I like the idea. I think it's, you know, this innovative type training is, I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
So long-term, I mean, will you eventually do all 500 of these planes that are just parked, or is there a need for them, and or you maybe evolve into something else?
Probably not all 500 of them, but, you know, I think the latest conversation I heard, at least 100 to 200 initially. It takes about 8 months, 9 months to do one. So that kind of gives you an idea of how long it would be around.
Other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, could you give me a little bit of a Hispanic serving institution, what that is, and by 2030, what kind of costs are involved?
Yeah, so a couple of things about what Hispanic serving institutions are. They're just the strict definition is that 25% of your student body, the students identify as Hispanic students. And we're on the cusp of becoming an emerging Hispanic serving institution, and when that happens, about 15% of your students identify as Hispanic. What this does is opens up opportunities for federal funding to support those students in higher education.
Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed on your growth in population and enrollment, you went on the I-35 corridor and you're up to, in 21, you were up to about 1,150 students or so. The question I had, is there an advantage to be in an I-35 corridor, or why did you choose that?
Yeah, it was very strategic. So many of the businesses that are located in Wichita are also have offices in those particular cities. And so it's not a big stretch for families to think about Wichita. You know, Textron's in Dallas, you know, Koch Industries is in Houston. Many of these individuals are familiar with Wichita because either they may have lived there before or their families traveled there for business. So that was the reason. You know, a lot of the aircraft manufacturing is up and down the I-35 corridor as well. So that's the main reason.
And if I understood it right, those students pay in-state tuition?
Correct.
Okay. And most of those students, are they at WSU or are they at WSU Tech?
Those are the ones that I shared there with you, or just at Wichita State. They're
not Tech.
Yeah, WSU Tech has some additional students in their college as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Mumma? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed on your graph on page 7, it has it going down to the United States border in 2 areas. My question is, what kind of footprint are we going to have in Mexico at WSU? I think I've seen some of that on TV. What's the long-term plan with that?
Here's another connection to the aerospace industry. So for years, the companies in Wichita have been doing business in Chihuahua, primarily in Mexico. There is an individual there. He's the president owner of American Industries. He would like to develop a satellite campus of Wichita State around engineering and business for his community. Arkansas State has already done this in another region of Mexico, in Querétaro. And so this is to sort of replicate that model. We're not putting any of our resources into that. They are doing that for us.
I guess one final question before you go. Did you either one of you senators have any other questions? Okay. Yeah, we've been talking about deferred maintenance, and we've been looking at this on our building committee and talking about it in Ways and Means for quite a long time, and also the possibility of putting some funding in there for raising buildings. At Wichita State, what do you have just off the cuff idea on how many buildings you have that might qualify to be raised?
Yeah, just for the benefit of everybody on the committee, we are currently building a new business building, and when that building, or that college, and the College of Business moves to the new building, they will vacate their current facility. We're going to gut that facility and move about 17 offices into that facility and be able to raise 5 buildings. And we have another building that we're also considering tearing down if we can find some room for some offices in that building. So 5 to 6.
Okay. Any cost estimate?
How much it would cost to do that? I can tell you what it's going to cost to take down Cessna Stadium, and that's about $2 million. Those are different facilities, probably less complex. They're built back in the 50s, 60s. You know, they're just concrete type, not very attractive buildings. I don't know. $3 or $4 million probably, I'd hate to guess because it could.
That's fine. And you might, if you have time, sometime put a figure together and share it with our committee.
Okay.
All right, thank you for being here. Next, we have questions for Chancellor Gerard. I guess the first one I would have is on your foreign exchange students. You said you was about 50% back.
Correct.
So 50% of what kind of number was that?
We at full capacity, we usually run about 2,000 international students on campus, and that dropped to well below 1,000 when the pandemic hit. And then we recovered about half of the drop. So we're back up. I think we're almost to 1,700 back to today.
How many of those students stay in Kansas when they graduate? Is there a number for that?
You know, a lot of them are graduate students. A lot of them come into our master's and PhD programs, although we still have a significant number of undergraduates. And a lot of the undergraduates stay on to do graduate work. And I would say probably the vast majority would like to stay. The question is, at any given time, what the challenges are around the immigration laws and the ability to get a green card to stay and work with an industry here. Our industries tell us they would like to hire them all as well. But again, there's, particularly in recent years, been some challenges around that.
Well, and one other, just more or less a comment, but, you know, the work you do with Wichita State and Salina on the training the medical folks is a tremendous program. I hope to, maybe we could increase those a little, you know, as far as.
Yeah, I mean, well, our operation in Salina probably has a little bit of room for expansion. It's really limited by the size of the medical community that those students are working in. We have added now we're at 56 nursing students in Salina, in addition to the 32 physician or MD students that we have there, and are currently looking at health professions programs, physical therapy, radiation technology, those sorts of things, to add in Salina as well. In Wichita, we're very excited about the collaboration with Wichita State, which would allow us to co-locate all of our assets from a health professions education perspective. We've got about 300 and some students down there now. I think you've got about 3,000 students in these programs, and to be able to put them all into one facility to work together and to share collaborative space, we think would be a real attraction to draw even additional students in.
Great.
And of course, a lot of those students stay locally. Our medical school in Wichita is the #1 medical school in America for placing physicians into a rural environment.
We appreciate it. Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I noticed on the national trends on your chart, and I think it's on page 4 that you have here, Kansas is between 10 and 20% fewer grads. What does Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota doing when they're increasing theirs from 10 to 30%? Are they doing something different, or do we need to import some cold weather?
It's a fair question, particularly the Dakotas. I haven't figured that one out. I don't know the answer to that.
We probably need to look into that and see what they're doing.
Would agree. If you look at Iowa as well.
Right. Thank you.
Senator Fagg.
Great observation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chancellor, for your presentation. This isn't anything in your program, but you're listed on that. I was looking at affordable education. We're wanting to freeze tuition. When you look at the other ones that was on a graph on the other one, we're really on the low side of everything now. So I'm looking at this saying, why do we need to freeze that part of it if we're very competitive right now?
Well, and I'll speak for KU because we all actually kind of operate in different marketplaces, if you will. So if we look at the Big 12, for example, as a competitive marketplace for us, for students, if you go back about 4 years, we were the most expensive public university in the Big 12. Now, with having been able to hold the line here for a few years, we have dropped down to, I think, the second most expensive public in the Big 12. So there's probably a little room there. We just don't think there's a lot of room there to remain competitive with our peers. And the same conversations that you're hearing today about other states starting to offer in-state tuition, Arkansas has been very aggressive in that market. Arizona is now getting very aggressive in that market as well. So we know that pressure on affordability is only going to escalate in the coming years.
Thank you.
One question I'll ask you that I also asked Wichita State. I know you have the old power plant over there for raising. Do you have any other facilities you can think of right off?
We do. We have a large dormitory that's been sitting empty for 3 years and is full of asbestos and a few other challenges. And to your question earlier, it's about $2.5 million to take that building, just that one building down. The power plant probably is closer to around $1 million. Much like Dr. Mumma mentioned, our desire over time is to consolidate, vacate, and take down. But that is a sequential process, just as he talked about, building one new one, redoing another one, and then vacating others. That's kind of how we're thinking about this as well as we go forward. So yeah, we try not to keep a lot of things around that are sitting empty because those are big liabilities, but we're also mapping 5 years out to figure out how we can get more of them into the pipeline.
Thank you. Next, we'll have questions for Dr. Mason.
I'm happy to tell you we have 0 buildings to be taken down at Fort Hays State University.
Questions for Dr. Mason, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Noticed on the information that you handed out, Fort Hays State is one of the lower costs and, like you say, best value for online activities. How does the numbers compare there for your online students versus your on-campus students?
You mean what is the tuition difference?
Well, no, I mean, how many students do you have online versus the ones you have?
Oh, okay, we have this fall, our head count for on-campus was 3,807. For online, it was 6,604, and international, 3,693.
So those ratios seem like you have your big online presence.
Our online has been our leader in generating, and as you can see, we also have a large number of online Kansans, and that has continued to grow. We did lose a little bit, but we actually had an uptick on online Kansans this year as well. That was in the written testimony on page 9.
With those numbers, what I was looking at was how do we bring those students, those 6,000 online students or 3,000, how do we bring those to Kansas? Is there an effort to do that, to recruit those students for jobs in Kansas?
Well, of course, we want to be thriving in Kansas. Our on-campus, out-of-state students are more likely to stay in Kansas, quite frankly, than our online. But what that has done is produced a source of revenue for us to make sure that we can keep Kansas, Fort Hays State affordable for our Kansas students. And the same with our international partnership program as well. So as we've grown, that's created the elasticity to keep our tuition low, and then that allows students to come for a high-value, great ROI education.
Thank you.
Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wanting to, as far as your capital stuff, how are you on the issue of deferred maintenance?
So the group that was hired to do the replacement value, and I would like to call Mike Barnett, our retiring CFO, to give you some numbers. He is here today. The important thing to us is knowing that The replacement value is based on replacement value. It's not on just what's breaking down, but Mike can do that much better if I may have your permission to call him to the mic.
Sure. Please state your name.
Mike Barnett, I'm the retiring Vice President of Administration and Finance at Fort Hays State University. You asked for a number of deferred maintenance. Based on the accruent study that was done here a couple of years ago, our deferred balance is about $140 million. Of that, as Tisa had mentioned earlier, it's based on replacement value of systems that are still operating. So, you know, it's a high number. Our facilities are in really good condition, and you know, we do spend our own money on maintaining our facilities. In the past 10 years, we spent about $40 million of our own money on renovations and things of that nature. So we try to take care of the facilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have one, Dr. Mason. You had in here about a proposal for a cybersecurity initiative, and you would need about $500,000 a year going forward for that?
That is correct.
And do you currently have a program of this type, or is this something entirely new, or you're?
It is brand new. It will work with our Small Business Development Center network as well as our Docking Institute, and it will work through our informatics department to create that incubator. It will be a service to help create investment in small businesses. As we know, the large businesses have no problem with tech services, but the small businesses, particularly in rural Kansas and rural communities, don't have the expertise. So we will bring our faculty and our staff and our students together to work in this incubator along with the Small Business Development Center and the Docking Institute to help them with their venture issues when it comes to technology.
Thank you. Senator Alley. Okay. Anything else for Dr. Mason? Seeing none, thank you for being here today. And before we bring Blake back up, on the deferred maintenance at Wichita State, do you have a dollar number on yours?
About $150 million.
Okay, thank you. And Chancellor, do you have an approximate on the deferred? Sure.
Probably closer, for us, it's closer to 500 million.
500 million, okay.
And I'm a proud owner of 1896 buildings, so, which I cannot take down.
Thank you. If President Blake Flanders would take a question, Senator Alley.
Thank you. I noticed on your capital renewal initiative, you said the current status relying on primarily the EBF fund. Is that basically the 1.5 mils? There is talk around this building of eliminating that 1.5%, and the reason to do that is reduce property taxes for every Kansan. If that is the case, it looks like in 20 years we're going to be almost $5 billion behind. So how do we replace that?
We would be, as a system, and our board would be totally opposed to eliminating that revenue source because of its stability. And there has been marginal growth over time with the EBF. If we look, I do not believe it would. It may be replaced in 1 or 2 years with state general fund, but I do not believe, based on past practice, that state general fund would fund at the same level as EBF. And what we know is EBF is inadequate anyway. So we will do everything we can to oppose that.
That, if I'm looking at your graph, it runs approximately $50 million a year for that. So, and we're behind now, so when we'd get farther behind if we did that, but,
It would be devastating for our system.
okay, thank you.
Senator Fag.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering, Mr. Flanders, on information technology, the government, or the governor's recommends 20 million in IT. Is that broken down so much for each university? Is there some that's done a better job of getting current? Is this 20 million going to get them all current? I'm just trying to get a feel of, we've had enough unemployment problems around here. I don't want to have a problem in this area too, so.
So the 20 million is an assistance. We're going to increase the cybersecurity piece that's going to hopefully help limit the threat. I am not going to tell you that it is a problem solver completely. We will still be investing university resources into IT. We are just, that infrastructure, similar to the maintenance of facilities, needs assistance. You know, we have multiple threats every day. If we were to say, what would make it perfect? Well, I would hate to even estimate that. We're not trying to go for perfection, but we're trying to go for assistance. So I'm sure that perhaps sometimes a smaller network is easier to maintain, a limited number of users is easier to maintain. A network where people are traveling internationally, where you're connecting a lot globally, it's harder to maintain. Many times the threats do come from within inside the network. I just can't give you a specific answer on. I know that 20 million will not just totally fix cybersecurity. We will always be under threat, but it will be an assistance.
So Blake, how do you decide who gets how much in that deal? Who makes that decision?
The board.
Okay.
So we'll see those individual proposals. We have a percentage breakdown that we've kind of historically used for each of the universities in the University of Kansas Medical Center. Traditionally, we've kind of operated within that framework, and I can show you what that would look like.
Blake, I guess the question would be then, if this is for such things as a cyber security, could this be something that could be used for Fort Hays State's new program, or do we need a?
So our vision for this would be actually for the institution to beef up their own cybersecurity profile.
So it wouldn't be funding?
Yeah, so I would suggest if, for the Fort Hays program, either if it needs ongoing support, try to get that out of state general fund, or if it were more one-time expenditures, perhaps a Sparks request, if it were allowable under federal.
Okay, thank you. And our committee is looking at all options as far as dollars from the Spark money. So, committees, are any other questions? Seeing none, thank you all for being here today. We appreciate it.